This is Love Notes, daily devotions from Holy Trinity Lutheran Church. Grace and peace to you. Job has been silenced by a God who has overwhelmed him with the power and divine beauty of creation and the Creator. God hasn't answered his questions, but God has been present. And Job has said, I have nothing to say. God's not ready to let him off the hook, though. In chapter 40, verse 6, it says, Then the Lord, Yahweh, answered Job out of the whirlwind, same as the beginning of chapter 38. Gird up your loins like a man, same as chapter 38. I will question, and you declare to me. In other words, no, you're not going to just go silent. I'm going to question you, and you're going to answer me. Will you even put me in the wrong? Will you condemn me that you may be justified? Have you an arm like God, and can you thunder with a voice like his? It starts to sound like Elihu again, doesn't it? Can you stand before the Lord? Deck yourself with majesty and dignity. This is an allusion to taking on the robes of a judge. Clothe yourselves with glory and splendor. Pour out the overflowings of your anger and look on all who are proud and abase them. God now begins to speak to Job in a way that expands Job's understanding of what it means to be the Creator, the judge, the one who presides over good and evil. It's not as simple as Job and his friends thought it was. In other words, you go ahead and put on the judge's robe. You stand before those who make you angry and look at those who are proud and then abase them. Destroy them. Look on all who are proud. Bring them low. Tread down the wicked where they stand. Hide them all in the dust, in death, together. Bind their faces in the world below. In other words, send them to hell. Then I will also acknowledge to you that your own right hand can give you a victory. God seems to be saying here, Job, it's not that easy. When we stand before the wicked and the righteous of this world, there's a weight to the divine words of judgment. It isn't simple sorting like your friends seem to think it is. Well, go ahead and punish the wicked. Go ahead and reward the blessed. Because when you do that, you're going to mix up things. Jesus tells a story about this in the Gospels where he said it's like wheat and tares growing together, weeds and wheat growing together. And they grow up together and you can't tell the difference. So you have to just harvest the whole thing and try to sort it out as best as you can. God is not a God who destroys. God is one who creates. And so God doesn't want to bring wicked things and punishments upon anyone. It's more difficult than you think, Job. So why don't you go ahead and put on the robes of the judge of creation and see if you can handle it. And then two images are introduced, the Behemoth and the Leviathan. Now these are ancient mythic kind of creatures. Today in our scientific mindset, Bible scholars always want to say, well, the Behemoth, really that referred to the hippopotamus. Maybe it did. Great big animal who really is a fierce creature if you get in its way and interrupt its feeding. You don't want to mess with a hippo. They kind of eat like cows, but they live in the water, and that's where chaos is, and they're just scary all the way around. The Leviathan is thought to be sometimes the crocodile, which is a terrible, fearsome creature in that part of the world. But there's also a sense in which these mythic creatures lived in the ancient minds as much more than scientific representations of hippos and crocodiles. The behemoth and the leviathan represent the dragons, the monsters, the manifestations of evil that are more powerful than our imaginations can even handle. So these two mythic and terrifying creatures are brought up now. Look at Behemoth. Now, Behemoth, if it's supposed to be a evil, mythic character, now God says, which I made just as I made you. It eats grass like an ox. Its strength is in its loins, and its power in the muscles of its belly. Sounds kind of like a hippopotamus. God made them. They terrify us. Why? We don't know. Some of these creatures we call evil, but God made them. So God's question is, if I made the behemoth, and you can't understand how to control the behemoth or what it's for, then how can you judge? Same thing of Leviathan. Can you draw out Leviathan, maybe a crocodile, maybe a sea monster? Can you draw out Leviathan with a fish hook or press down its tongue with a cord? That's what you humans can do, but it's too big for that. Can you put a rope on its nose and pierce its jaw with a hook? No, it's too big for that. Why was it even created? It terrifies humanity, and yet God created it. Everything in creation sits below God, even the things that terrify us. Even the storms of the night, the thunders of the heaven. And how can you judge? Should I get rid of Behemoth? Should the Leviathan not live anymore? These are the questions that Job cannot answer. And if Job can't see his way through to figuring out what to do with the Leviathan or Behemoth or the evil of this world in its most terrifying aspect, how can then Job figure out what God is supposed to do with him? Those answers are all wrapped up together. Of Leviathan, it says in verse 25, when it raises itself up, the gods are afraid. But the God is not. It surveys everything that is lofty. It is the king over all the proud, and yet it is not king over God. So in other words, Job, do you want to be judge and bear the weight of judgment upon all? Do you want to be the cause of punishment on anyone? Because in the end, can you really discern between the good and the evil, the righteous and the unrighteous? Can you really discern whether Behemoth and Leviathan are evil or good? You can't. And so therefore, how can you ask me to answer your questions? Amen.